and welcome to A-Team Group's webinar on taking a holistic approach to buy-side data management. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at A-Team Group, and I'll moderate today's webinar. Our expert speakers are Julia Bardmesser, former Senior Vice President, Head of Data, Architecture and Salesforce Development at Voya, Sylvain Penderis, Chief Data Officer at PSP Investments, and Don Huff, Global Head of Client Services and Operations at Bloomberg Data Management Services. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a minute, but just a few pointers for you, our audience. On your screen, you'll see a Slido panel to the right of the video. There you'll find two sections, one for polls and one for your questions. We'll be running 3 polls during the webinar, so please do place your votes there so we can gauge your opinion. And please place your questions for the speakers in the question panel whenever you like. We'll take them at some point during the Q&A rather than waiting until the end. So please put your questions there and we'll answer as many as we can. Okay, enough of me and let me come over to our speakers. So Julia, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest here.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. I'm Julia Bardmesser. I have extensive experience in data-driven digital transformation in financial services, most recently at Voya, but much broader also in Citi, Deutsche Bank, FINRA, and Freddie Mac, going back a few years now. I've worked across data and technology capabilities on data governance, data management, and overall technology capabilities enabling digital transformation.
Thank you. Sylvain, over to you.
Hi, my name is Sylvain Penderis. I'm the head of data platform at PSP Investment. PSP Investment is one of the biggest pension funds in Canada. My role at PSP is really to take care of everything of the life cycle of data within the company. So from acquisition, meaning the market data team reports into me, and then the data strategy, data operations, data governance, and then at the very end, the data technology, which is very rare in organizations to have that combination of all the capabilities to deliver data for the firm.
Thank you. And over to you, Don.
Hi, everybody. My name is Don Huff. I manage client services and operations for Bloomberg Data Management Services. This is my 20th year at Bloomberg, and I spent the bulk of my career working with customers, designing solutions for data management, both on the real-time side as well as for more operational data sets like Security Master, Price Master, etc. So thanks for everybody for joining today.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Plenty of expertise in the room. Let's kick off with one of those poll questions. And it is, what is the state of play on data management at your firm, assuming you represent a buy-side firm? So while you place your votes, let me come to Sylvain to hear his views on the state of play on data management across the buy-side. And he is in the thick of it. So what are you thinking, Sylvain?
Yeah, well, as you would expect, our industry has made significant strides in the management of data, and I hope that our poll will confirm that. When you look at the latest EDM Council benchmark or all the surveys coming from the big consulting agencies, what you see is really the establishment of data management programs have been a strong success going from the last years into now. I think 80% of buy-side companies have now established a data management program. So that's significant progress from 10 years ago, when those programs were very rare, or sometimes they were mostly an extension of technology. So that's a big change, I think, the shift from technology to a business function. The second thing I want to say is the role of the CDO, of the Chief Data Officer, continues to gain importance at the top level of organizations. And I need to also acknowledge that the competencies that are needed now compared to what they were 10 years ago have probably changed also because of the scope of the responsibility of the CDO have probably expanded, including now analytics and literacy initiatives. Another trend that is worth mentioning is really the establishment of data governance programs everywhere. I think the focus on data governance is really a key strategic initiative, especially given the increasing responsibility that data resources have on privacy and data usage overall. But enough of the past, let's try and look into what our next frontier is as a data management specialist in our industry. I think it's about developing a strong data-driven culture. Because if we don't focus on literacy, organizations most of the time come up short in achieving their objectives. What's the point of building a robust data infrastructure if the employees who would benefit most from it are not able to access it or are not trained in how to use it? So that's for me the main remaining issue, the slow speed with which companies make a switch to a data-driven culture. I think in the last survey that I saw, less than 1/3 of buy-side firms believe they succeeded at that objective. And maybe the last topic is really around data technology. There has been a significant shift from the past in the past few years. If you really remember, half a decade ago, we were talking about big data, data lakes, and pipelines, and lake houses or data warehouses, whatever. But now they have become commodities. But I think the current focus in our digital world is on a data explosion and how to make sense of it, how to connect the dots between all these data sets that we are bringing in. Ontologies and graphs didn't really develop a strong hold, so maybe artificial intelligence will be the new solution for bringing meaning in a faster way. That's something to ponder going forward.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Don, from your perspective, when you're out there in the market, what do you see in terms of progress?
Yeah, and I think really it starts with the history lesson that Sylvain was giving us, where the industry generally will not change unless they're forced to. So I think that the challenges that have driven us to the point at which we're having conversations like this is the volume of data is absolutely huge. People are wanting to bring in more data. Some of my customers are asking themselves, did we bite off more than we could chew acquiring all this content and bring it into our organization? So generally that's driving the conversations around replatforming or modernizing, partly out of need, but also partly because, which we'll talk about today, just some newer technologies that Sylvain was talking about are available to the market. People want to future-proof. They realized where they are now, they realized how they got there, and they want to think about, where they're going to take their data management strategy to future-proof it towards the things that maybe, 10 years ago, the decisions that were made weren't necessarily keeping in mind some of the data challenges of today. And I think when you look at the different types of customers that I speak to, active managers are very focused on differentiating themselves from their peers. So data management and the technology they use is one of those differentiators. How quickly can they, determine if there's value in that data set, and how quickly can they put that into play?
Excellent, thank you. May we see the poll results, please? And Sylvain, perhaps you, oh, goodness me, perhaps you'd like to comment on those.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised, even for sure, nothing is ever perfect. So let's acknowledge that first. But again, it's when I look at where we were 10 years or 15 years ago, that's a significant improvement. Just the fact that data management is now seen as a business function. In the past, it was really technology leading the way because you were in charge of databases, and therefore it was easier to take care of the content as well. I think now everybody understands the importance or the criticality of data within a company, and therefore those departments, those data management or data governance departments have been created to reflect the growing importance of managing data properly. So yeah, for sure, there is a lot of things still to be done, but my gosh, it was a long way from 10 years back.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Let's run a second poll while we can to gauge the actual problems that people are experiencing in buy-side data management. And the question says, what are the challenges and limitations of legacy data management systems at your organization? This time you can tick as many of the boxes as you like, so take it easy, but as many as are appropriate to your organization. And while you do that, I'd like to bring Julia in to tell us how she sees the challenges and limitations of legacy data management.
So in legacy data management system, it's just beyond data management system, just legacy processes and systems in the companies, in my mind, can split into dimensions. One of them, they lack ability to bring all useful data. What I mean by that usually the operational systems that create data, what we call in data management discipline, data producers, were built for a specific operational or business purpose. And they were very much concentrated on getting the minimum necessary to accomplish whatever it is, custom onboarding or sale or whatever it is that that system is supposed to do. It was not focused on getting all possible data, which is what's necessary to really move forward in terms of analytics. And also data quality was not really considered. And it's a lot of data completeness. There are a lot of stories out there. Then even if the front-end system had the requirement that you had to put a birth date, as an example, or date of issue, there might have been a check that the field is mandatory, but there was no check that the field is reasonable. So we have a lot of companies currently that have a lot of customers being born in 1900. So they're all over 100 years old, but that was the default date that went in. So that's one dimension, is making sure that your data is useful. The other piece, which is even bigger, is making data usable. And what I mean by usable is it easy to access? Usually in legacy systems, data is not that easy to access. In many companies, you still have COBOL mainframes. And even if you have a more modern infrastructure, ease of access of data for analytics was not part of the original architecture. The second question is it easy to understand? Do you know what the data is? If you have a code, do you know it's a currency code or is it a country code? If you have a name, is that something that you can uniquely identify your clients, your customers, and so on? And then the third piece of data being usable, is it easy to integrate? Can you bring your multiple data sets together? A lot of competitive advantage that firms have are on intersection of internal and external data. But being able to bring together and get that advantage between internal and external data, you need to be able to understand how those data sets connect. And that's one of the biggest challenges of the existing legacy systems. So the data, not only not particularly useful, but it's also whatever data is there is very difficult to get to and difficult to use.
Okay. Don, what are the problems you see when you're out there working with various different companies?
I think, traditional data management systems were really designed about being fully customizable. They were designed so that they have thousands of knobs and levers that you can toy with to get the system to operate the way that you want. But I think that today's challenges of bringing in a lot more data, using more data, and the time to market to get value out of the data has required our customers to really want to become more agile. When you think about how those systems are built, there's a desire for that one system to do everything for you. But as you make decisions on how you work within an enterprise data management platform, what happens is the decisions become serialized, such that the decisions you made a year ago kind of determine how you can operate today, because you don't want to have to go back and change everything that led up to today's challenge. So oftentimes you're kind of put within a restrictive box, or faced with a larger migration plan by going backwards in order to go forwards. And I also see that, today when, a customer might tell me that, their current enterprise data management platform doesn't work for them. And then they send me an RFI that asks me, does my system do exactly what that old system does? When in reality, they need a new system. They need a new way to work within this data so that some of the old challenges that exist from fully customized platforms don't become a burden for, tomorrow's challenges. And then I'd say lastly, I think ESG kind of put everyone on notice with their legacy data management platforms. It's one thing to work with one or two different financial data providers and be able to bring that all in. But when you talk about how many ESG data providers are out there right now, it becomes very difficult to scale what was maybe one or two or maybe a third vendor. Now I see people using 4, 5, 6 different ESG vendors on top of 2, 3, 4, security and price master vendors. The more variability you have in that equation, it becomes more and more difficult to some of the things that Julie was bringing up, which is, accessing that data, but more importantly, using that data the way that you intended to.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Hopefully we'll answer some of these problems as we go along, but let's first see that poll result if we may. And Don, would you like to comment on this one? Yes, we're still at manual intervention.
Yeah, and I think this goes a lot with the manual of intervention and high cost of human resources. Again, just touched upon what I just brought up with ESG data. Change management is a burden. A lot of customers that we work with today and help them with their ESG problems, they thought they were solving their problem with internal builds or kind of building out their infrastructure that they've invested in, only to find that there's a constant change control component that never really goes away. So the project of bringing on ESG data, making it work within your firm, it's something that just doesn't change. So I'm not surprised to see that up the top. And then I think I led with the second point, which is the lack of flexibility in traditional data management platforms have caused a lot of firms to rethink their entire data strategy.
Okay.
But if I may add a few things in there, I think Dan mentioned it very well earlier. It's really when we start thinking of tomorrow's solution based on our habits and usage of the past, we're doomed to fail. We have to be very careful to take advantage of the progress that the industry is making, whether from a data vendor's perspective or even from a technology perspective. Take full advantage of that and move into a different world. I think too many companies are stuck with the past and they are not trying to do this kind of big bang approach where everything has to be or could be challenged. And that's probably a limitation of everything we're seeing in the industry now.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about why now then, and how best to approach this. And Don, coming back to you, why is now the time buy-side firms should be considering investing in data management modernization? It's a topic that comes up quite a lot in the buy-side, and I guess there are plenty of reasons why. Can you share with us?
Sure. In short, I think the availability of new technologies with new approaches towards data management. And I think that now is the time to really invest in that change, because technologies make some of the challenges of 5 or 10 years ago a lot easier to accomplish and a lot quicker to accomplish. Technology used to, the desired capabilities, the technologies used to support our customers, even internally here at Bloomberg, have evolved, mainly driven by these firms wanting to become more agile. And I think agility is kind of the big key theme towards some of the discussions around transitioning to a more modern platform. And I think ultimately which surprised me 10 years ago, having been in the industry so long, is cloud adoption. Cloud adoption I think has made a lot of things easier. The ability for them to provide our firm security to put their data in these cloud platforms makes it a lot easier now to have a user experience with that data that I think has helped driven people to make the decision to invest in their infrastructure.
Okay, so then from a practitioner's perspective, what would you say there in terms of, why now, if you agree with that?
Well, I agree with Dan on the technology side for sure, but I see also a lot of external factors coming into as drivers of modernization in some ways. The first one is consolidation in the asset management industry. If you think of today's giants, they have trillions of dollars under management. 10 years ago, we were talking about hundreds of billions. Now it's totally different scale. And you have to keep in mind that 2021 was a record year for global merger and acquisition activity in wealth and asset management. And now you're still seeing the big giants of this who are combining their wealth and asset management into single divisions. Think Goldman Sachs, for example. So there is a lot of consolidation there, and our buy-side companies are not looking for targets only for scale. We're not talking about AUM anymore. We're talking about digital models, either for delivery or for advisory. So it's really a big driver of modernization in some ways. Consolidation is one. Number two is probably the fact that our industry is moving into more and more complex asset classes. Alternatives and privates, obviously. But if you go into those asset classes, you need to reconsider your portfolio models. And that requires more data, more blending capabilities and such. So that's another driver, I think, changing our industry. The third one is really digitization as a whole. In a digital world, everything needs to be reviewed and adapted and improved. If you think of retail banking, for example, we were used to going to our local branch and do whatever we wanted there, but now we have apps and we have call centers. if we were to make a poll right now on when was the last time you were into your local branch, I would be very interested in understanding the kind of answers. Okay, so digitization forces acceleration, and then we need to have a very strong operations and analytics backbone to make sure that the companies take care or takes advantage of the digitization. So I think that's number 3. And the last one is really ESG. Don already mentioned it. ESG is a catalyst of the change. And you know, if you think a few years back, we were talking about different kind of classification, whether it was sectors or geographies or even ratings. But now ESG has become another dimension that we need to take into account to measure ourselves against. So these are the 4 drivers that I see driving the reason for modernization.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And staying with you, Sylvain, having talked about the bringing together of large firms to creating large firms, we've talked about legacy. How do you see a more holistic approach to data management working out, and what would be the end game if you could see it?
Well, it's a difficult question for sure. If we all had the answer to that, that would be, I think we were the Holy Grail then. I think, you know, the main thing is the traditional approach to data management was centered on data quality and data governance. So that was defensive first. What companies were doing is consolidating their foundations, making sure you were good on operations, you had no issues with regulators. You know, if you think of all the policies and procedures, the measures, the famous KPIs for such a purpose, whether the number of incidents, the number of exceptions, or whether you hit your SLAs or not, all these kind of things were defensive in nature. I think a more modern strategy puts data management as a business enabler. How do we increase client retention, for example? And then your KPI could be the number of client contacts you have during your onboarding process, the speed of onboarding, or the frequency of updates on your website for your clients, and these kind of things. How can you go faster at adding new data sets and blend them into the enterprise data model? How can I make better decisions? So for me, it's not a new approach in itself. It's actually connecting the dots between data management and business outcomes. So if we connect data management to business capabilities, then its value is associated to the business success. That's, I think, a big change in the way we need to consider ourselves as data practitioners. And I think Don mentioned it, you know, the data management right now, the current shift is on usability and potentially going to the self-service, coupled with the most advanced technologies available, whether you call them machine learning, deep learning, or anything else, that's really fine. But completing the traditional analytics we used to have with artificial intelligence is definitely a strategic direction any buy-side firm is looking at right now. And the last thing I want to say, and we use different words for that. I think, you know, we can call it change management, we can call it different things, but for me, it's critical for company to understand that data management is everybody's business. So it requires commitment, and I really mean commitment, from every business to be an active participant into making data management scalable and sustainable on the long term. And that's the reason why I believe that data literacy has become the core capability of the digital world.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Julia, what are your views here? You talked about some of the difficulties of legacy. How do you see a more holistic sort of approach working?
So to build on what Sylvain had said, there is a really close tie-in between business growth imperatives and available data management capabilities, especially for the businesses. And as AI and ML becomes much more and more a tool for the businesses to expand and grow, all of that requires extensive data management capabilities. As an example, all the business growth or expanding the business relies on either bringing more customers or retaining customers, on innovating on the product, expanding the use, cross-sell of the current product, or improving the margin. Especially right now, one of the imperatives around data management is shrinking margins and needing to come up with the better products on the market and to innovate. So data management capabilities, making data useful and usable, allows companies to achieve business growth. So it's all about business drivers and business growth, and data capabilities, data management discipline across the entire company, not only enterprise data management groups or chief data officer groups, but across data literacy is incredibly important. And that understanding of tying in of how the business would grow into data management capabilities. So any decisions you want to make, any next best action, you have automated cues and responses and decisions coming your way where the business side of the company can make the best possible decisions based on all the available data, both internally within the company and from the external providers.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Don, coming back to you, on a step-by-step basis, could you tell us a little bit about how firms can transition from legacy to a more modern system?
Sure. I think Sylvain said it best, kind of to start with as a step one is connecting the dots between data management to business capabilities. Or as I like to think about it is, defining your target operating model. You need to have well-defined use cases that you intend to serve, in the future, so that you have and can develop clear strategic guiding principles to be available to you throughout the process, whether it's deciding on what technologies to build or the decisions that you make along the way. You need to have that strategic guiding principle to come back to ask yourself, does this decision bring me closer or further away from my target operating model? Next is, I think it's important to be able to break the transition into pieces. I think the firms that I've worked with that have done this really well is that each milestone provides iterative business value. In a perfect world, those iterative milestones actually help fund the next portion of the project. So the advantages gained are able to use some of the resources to build into that next milestone. So 2 is, I think, breaking that transition into pieces such that the milestones give you back value. 3 is now you have a position now where you could choose the tools. This is usually a build versus buy analysis. This is where you have to determine what resources you have on hand and skills that you have within your organization versus what available tools are out there. And then 4th, I think it's to set realistic goals, right? So a lot of things that I talk about with our customers, and we go back to that legacy data management platform challenge. It's this effort to get to 100% as quickly as possible, when in reality, getting to 80% extremely quickly and using the remaining part of the project on the 20% allows you to kind of accelerate the change and get towards that more modern approach. So I think those are the steps that I would do at a high level, but certainly as a practitioner, I'd love to hear what Julia has to offer.
Sure, Julia, how would you handle this transition?
So actually what Don said, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the first part, because I think that's a very hard part. So the last step on the technology decisions and building and figuring out the tools, we've been doing this for a while, and we have really good lessons learned on how to do it. The first part that we've been talking about, which is how do you tie your business goals to data management capabilities, and then how do you build a roadmap, is really important, and there is no recipe yet on how to do this on a repeatable basis across the businesses. So I want to spend a little bit more time there. It's how do you prioritize? So the first, it's a business-driven data strategy. It's not technology-driven data strategy, and it's not even. It's very important to have a data team and chief data office, but the data strategy needs to be created in collaboration with those teams, but driven by the most important business outcomes that the company is looking for. So that's the very first set of steps around prioritizing your business goals, identifying them, and tracing how those business goals align to the data capabilities that you need to have in place, and then having a holistic roadmap that's not only about building data environment or analytics environment or building analytics team, but it's a holistic roadmap that touches on business business operations, technology teams that support front-end business systems, the vendors that you work with, and the enterprise data teams working together to get you there. Because it's a team sport. Nobody can do it. No one team can do it on its own. It has to be a holistic roadmap touching on all of those pieces. And then you have all the other steps that Don has mentioned, because I'm a big believer in starting small, in getting minimal viable product in place, achieving business benefits, and then iteratively building on that and reusing what you've built along the way. So that's kind of part of the implementation. But again, I'm going to go back to, I think all of us been saying for now about 30 minutes, this importance of tying business goals into data management capabilities and getting really in the details and having that to be foundation of the roadmap.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, well, I think we're all agreed that technology is not the driver here, or the leader indeed. There are useful techs and tools around. So Silvan, you mentioned AI, ML earlier. How do you see the most useful kind of solution services, technologies here at the moment?
Well, the one way to mention it would be anything that speeds time to market. I think you need to consider everything, absolutely everything. And it starts with cloud, obviously, because of elasticity and everything else that we can get from there. But cloud 5 years ago was pretty much single implementation. Now we're talking about multi-cloud and inter-cloud data management. If you build your own data lake in the cloud for your own purposes, most likely you're going to have a lot of data vendors coming to you with their own cloud solutions, whether for governance, glossary and catalog, for example, but also from the data feed perspective and this kind of thing. So you have to think along the lines of cloud as an accelerator, but most likely you're going to have to assemble multiple clouds into your own architecture. So that's one thing. I think what is really, really critical, because when we talk about cloud, we talk about lake house and data warehouse on the lake. And people tend to see it as a repository for everything we acquire, which is fair. That's totally fair game. But if you think of those technology vendors, what they've been doing for a while now is actually bring an ecosystem as part of their offering. So we're talking about how to accelerate, again, acquisition of data. So market data vendors have been talking to technology vendors to make their feeds available on marketplaces. So that's a big accelerator for us, the consumers, because now what used to take weeks and months to get a new feed through pipelines and these kind of things into our own cloud now takes a matter of a few hours to get this straight into a repository. So I think marketplaces is really something that everybody needs to consider. The third thing that I think is very, very valuable, and I'm not sure that a lot of companies take advantage of that, is data as a service. In our company, we have decided to outsource a lot of our core functions, operations functions, to different providers. But data operations can also be outsourced to a lot of data vendors, or not a lot, actually. The selection is limited, but this is very, very high quality service providers. So when you outsource your data quality there and you get a feed of quality data into your own place, that's one less worry you have in your architecture. So I think everything that data as a service can provide from an operational perspective needs to be considered as well. But what is even more interesting in the offering coming from the data as a service vendors is now they're offering also matching and mapping capabilities. That famous semantic layer that everybody talks about, or at least pieces of it, you can get from an outside vendor because they already mapped multiple feeds from their own same vendors into one single, added value layer on top of their services or quality services. So I think all of them, cloud, marketplaces, data as a service, and all the matching and mapping capabilities that are needed to bring that semantic layer to the self-service consumption need to be considered so that you can go faster at bringing value to your businesses.
Thank you. That's quite a lot of things to be thinking about. Don, would you add to that?
Yes, I can only add to that because that was extremely well said. But I would say, the technology solutions and services that are available today, I think one important component to take into consideration is you have to choose technology that's not solely focused on your future target operating model, but act as a fulcrum that sits in between your current state and your future state. When we dream about that future target operating model, oftentimes customers forget about, being able to service the current systems, having a systematic approach to, sunsetting some of those systems and making sure that the risk is at its lowest level possible during that transition. So I would say added to all of this is that you also want to use and partner with a firm that has a technology that can sit between where you are now and where you're going, and can help you kind of break it up into pieces and get you there with keeping your risk low and making sure your systems are still going to function as you're reducing that technical debt of your legacy infrastructure.
Okay, thank you very much indeed to all. And let's take some audience questions now. I have rather a lot here, so I don't think we'll manage them all, but we'll do what we can. Let me come to you first, if I may, Julia. It says, our organization needs to modernize, but it is hard to get senior management buy-in and budget. How best can we do this?
That's an ever-present question, though I found that lately it's been easier in a sense that I think there is an accepted point of view that data and data management are key for business growth. So I would go back to what we've talked about, all three of us, I think, talked about, is starting with the business use case, starting with the business imperative. So if you are a new or existing data management executive in the company, I would spend some time with the business leaders to understand what are their most pressing problems, what is the growth related or efficiency or margins, what are the problems, and then tie it to data management capabilities, and then identify, famous low-hanging fruits, what can be achieved with a fairly small amount of time and money to bring value to business, and then build on that. One of the cautions, though, around low-hanging fruit, that it needs to be done in a way that's then reusable and you can build upon, that it's not one-offs that then kind of remain and add to your legacy infrastructure. So to summarize, I would say, understand business imperative of your different business lines. Identify where you can bring data management capabilities to solve problems in an iterative way that brings value sooner rather than later, and keep building on the reusable capabilities. So nothing with a very minimal throwaway work. That would be my approach.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Subhan, over to you. Something you've mentioned a little bit about outsourcing. I've got two questions here, and I'm going to put them together. If you need me to repeat either, just let me know. And the first says, what are the pros and cons of outsourcing some data management? And the second one says, where is a good place to draw the line between external and internal data management services? So pros and cons, and where do you draw the line?
Pros and cons. I think it's the first. It starts with culture. For me, the obvious pros is, from a company perspective, the one who is outsourcing. Okay, what is really critical is to understand where you want to focus your energy. You cannot do everything at once, so you need to pick your battles. And I think there is a lot of value to be added when you focus on the businesses rather than on operations. I'm not saying operations are not critical. They are absolutely the foundation of everything we do. Without proper foundations, obviously everything crumbles. So, but outsourcing something that is not deemed to be a competitive advantage can be part of your strategy. The cons obviously you need to get the quality, you need to have the information that you're going to get the quality that you expect, and you bring someone with a different culture into your own world. So sometimes it's not easy to realign. The reason why we have data governance programs is because we're trying to get the same language within the same company. So now you're adding partners on top of that, and they need to understand your language. So that's, I think, the pros and the main pros and cons for me. As to the second question, Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, where do you draw the line between internal and external?
Well, it depends on any company. Some companies are big enough that they can handle everything within. For us, we are a small company, even though we are global. But in a small company, you need, I think, to draw the line where you have competitive advantage, where you want to keep that competitive advantage. Everything related to your competitive advantage has to stay in-house. In my book, and I'm only speaking for myself, I'm not speaking on behalf of my company there, but in my book, everything else can be outsourced.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Don, one here for you. It's a fairly, I don't know if it's a practical question, but it seems like that to me. It says, how important do you feel your data infrastructure is when adopting a modern data approach? You are on mute. We're missing you.
Sorry.
That's
I think it's
okay.
a great question, because I think, you know, if you take a step back from all the things that we've been saying today, you know, that the foundation of what you want to build or where you're aspiring to go is the most important thing that there is. You know, when you think about the last 10 years of some of the technology advances in the front office and middle office, you know, software, it's been built on top of what was already there. And as you go higher and higher, if the foundation is not strong, you know, it starts to crumble, or it starts to become a technical debt problem. So I think first and foremost, you know, data interoperability should be the focus. If you can get the data into your organization and you can get your hands on it and you can make it available to your downstream users, it all starts there. You know, a lot of the customization, the creativity, you know, an organization might use this data to really, you know, generate, starts with being able to use it in such a way where they can use it across different data sets. So I think the foundation of what you want to build in a very practical sense, you know, the data model, Sylvain talked about it earlier, having a good, strong understanding of that data model, building on top of a strong data model, then makes every task going forward that much easier because you have a solid foundation.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And Julia, one more for you. And this is something that close to your heart. It says, it is difficult to find the right talent here. What would the panel suggest?
Finding the talent is very difficult. There is no shortcut. A lot of it, though, so I would, in terms of the talent, data literacy across the company is incredibly important. So one of the places where it's difficult to find, but I would concentrate looking at, is on the business side and overall in technology, to bring people who are data literate and who would put prioritization of data-centric, data-driven architecture over immediate deliverables. Because usually if you want to do things in the data-centric, data-driven way, it does take a lot more foresight and more analysis to do so. So a lot of it is trained from within. I found that some of the best data modelers and business analysts are people who come from the business that have also technical background as well, and being able to train people and explain. You get also people who understand the business, which is very important in data teams, but also understand how to deal with data. Go to colleges. So a lot of it is just figuring out how to find people who have aptitude for data and bring them in. I mean, beyond the usual one, you know, the recruiting companies that work specifically with the data professionals, and they have large networks. So, you know, the networks and, you know, going on LinkedIn and all of that. But some of the things that I have done that are not exactly that straightforward path is trying to find people who are data literate or have aptitude for data, and just training and educating them. And that seems to be one of the ways that you can build a data team.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. It's never easy in this market at the moment. I don't think whoever you want to hire. Okay, a last audience question. I'm going to put this one to both Sylvain and Don, but you can both listen to the other and see what we think. There is no answer, I don't think, but let's see what you think. Coming to you first, Sylvain. Do you think the buy side will be more build or buy for data management tech in the next 2 years?
There is no wrong and right there. I would guess because of the maturity in both the tech offerings, the data offerings, and everything. I think we're moving into the world where buy will be more prevalent in the future. And it's because some vendors, like the one that Don represents here, are doing a lot of things for us. And not taking advantage of that would be silly. You would be recreating the wheel when actually the wheel already exists. So I think that's the trend. But again, there will be pockets in companies where we need to keep that intelligence in-house and rely on our own models, our own ways of representing data. So there will be a balance between the two. But I would say the trend favors buying rather than building.
Okay. And over to you, Don.
Sure.
I know you have maybe a little bit bias here, but how do you see it?
I listen. I think a lot of customers that I speak to, that is the competition that we face is internal builds, and I think that I'll take a slightly different alternative spin on this. I think if you just take a look at ESG data, I think for many years now, a lot of our customers have had an open checkbook around technology or internal resources that they build to support ESG, whereas I think pressures on AUM going into 2023 and throughout is going to make them re-examine are their resources internally kind of focused on the right things, or do they need to reclaim some of the resources that they've dedicated to those projects? So even though somebody might have spent 6 months investing in building something internally, market conditions have forced them to rethink that exercise. So that I do help a lot of half-built systems when I walk in the door, because they realize how expensive this will be and the recurring costs involved in it. So I would agree with Sylvain in that. I think and I just took the ESG spin on it to be a little bit different. You're starting to see people now looking to either outsource or bring in a vendor to help them take the reclaim some of the resources that have been dedicated to those projects for the last couple of years.
Okay, excellent. So thank you very much to our audience for your questions, and indeed to our speakers for your answers. And coming back to my questions, let me come to you, Julia. We've talked a little bit about talent, but what are the actual required skills needed to make a successful transition and contain ongoing modernity?
I'll start with data literacy, and Sylvain talk about that as well. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time there because there are different types of data literacy, and all of that is needed. So there is what I call literal data literacy, meaning how do you use data in making the decisions? How do you storytell use based on data? What's the best way? So it's all around business intelligence or machine learning, and just teaching business and technology teams as well, how to use data in making the decisions, be it prioritization decisions or business decisions or what have you. The second type of data literacy, it's more targeted, is how do you establish data stewardship program? How do you build data science program? How do you create machine learning use cases? What are the use cases and business driven use cases that are good for machine learning and data science teams? But then there is a piece that I think is still being developed, which is strategic data literacy, which is being able, and we've talked about it extensively, all three of us in this conversation, is how do you tie your business goals, business growth imperative, or operational efficiencies to data capabilities. And that is very important on the business side to be able to do this, because prioritization and funding decisions are being made on business priorities, and being able to understand that if you want to personalize your offering, it's not just how your UX looks, but it's also underlying data, and it's actually master data management discipline that you need to have in your company that drives that ability. That's really important, and that's to large extent is still missing in the companies that's, in the usual financial companies. So that's a very important skill set to have. And then, of course, I highly recommend, not surprisingly perhaps, that asset management firms have chief data officers and enterprise data teams to enable much faster return on value from your investments in data. So that's a very important skill set. So a lot of it is around managing meaning of data, metadata management, master data management, data quality, data governance. All of those are very important skill sets. But again, I would start first and foremost, in addition of building the data teams, with business side data literacy.
Okay. I think you said some of that too as we've been going along. So is there anything you would add there?
No, I think Julia said it very well. If you don't speak the language of your company, whatever the industry you're in, it's not going to work. So you're not going to be helpful. And if you're not helpful, you're going to be out in a matter of a few months or whatever. So I think it's really a key component, speaking the language of the business you're in. If you think the four of us on this call, none of us were born in the same country, but we speak the same language. So I think that's really a key element if you want to be successful in data management in a company, whatever the company is. The second thing, it's really around the architecture, less the technical side of it, more the business side of it, understanding how data is processed, where it's processed, especially in a multi-cloud environment is really, really critical. Understanding who has the responsibility of guaranteeing the quality. So that's what I call the business architect. I think that's really needed in companies, especially when you are targeting a change, a major change or modernization of your own systems. I think it's very critical to have that wide view. And most of the time in companies, architects are the ones.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So pulling it all together, Don, can you walk us through a case study of a firm, a buy-side firm that has made the transition or is making the transition?
Sure. I would say at the end of Q3 of 2022, an active asset manager came to me really with a couple problem statements. One, they were looking to accelerate their journey into the cloud. They were looking to expand into the fixed income markets. They had already partnered with Bloomberg on buying their equity and futures options data. They wanted to buy bulk fixed income offerings from Bloomberg. So they wanted to be able to increase the time to value for that data set. And then thirdly, they still struggled with multi-vendor ESG. So in this particular case, they had already chosen a data warehouse provider called Snowflake. And they wanted us to help kind of put all the data that they buy from Bloomberg together, marry it to the ESG data, expand it or cascade it to all the fixed income instruments in their investable universe, and drop it in a table-ready format into Snowflake. Because of our investment in our data management service, DL Plus and ESG Manager, we were well positioned to kind of do this in fairly quickly. So the end result was we were able to process over 202 files that were contained with all these bulk offerings coming at different times per day. And we created our unified data model, which contains 6.8 million entities, 7 million instruments, 10 million markets, 7 million prices. And we were able to kind of put all that data together, marry it with 3 ESG vendors, and we were able to do it in 2 to 3 weeks. So this client really helped them kind of justify the commitment they made to us, to their senior management, by having something so quickly, and was able to show iterative business value in just a couple of weeks. So it was kind of something that I think we're seeing more of in the acceleration to cloud. And I would say the other thing that we haven't talked about today, briefly, which I also work a lot with, is a lot of third-party applications or front office applications are re-architecting how they operate. So front and middle office workflows now are starting to build their third-party services on top of these cloud platforms. So whether you're trying to get your data into your own cloud environment for your own legacy or your own systems, or working with a third party going to a similar architecture, you have something that could solve both of those problems. So I'd say those are two of the case studies that are most prevalent now, and I think will be probably for the next couple of years.
Okay, I'm going to leave that question there. Let's move on. We're running short of time, but let's run our last poll, if we may. The question this time: what extent of business and operational benefits would your organization expect to gain from transitioning to a more holistic view of data management? So while you vote, let me come to Julia and find out how she sees these kinds of benefits. We've talked very much about the connection between data and the business. What are the sort of exact benefits that you could see?
So I'm going to go a little bit to evolution of data, benefits of how data management has been seen. A lot of it in financial services started with this focus on regulatory requirements. So that was the original business driver for establishing data management capabilities in the companies. Then it transitioned because it built some amount of data management discipline and data capabilities in the company, and leveraging that investment leads to operational improvements. So one of the easy examples of what does it do is if you have huge manual processing and you want to automate straight-through processing, it requires interoperability of data, bringing together from multiple areas and having well understood, well identified data that can be tied together and to create straight-through processing. So having well-developed data management discipline helps a great deal with operational efficiency. And then if we move into analytics, data science, pieces of usage of data, then that's where data-driven, analytics-driven distribution, so bringing new customers in, improving the retention, improving the cross-sell, that's where, and then monetizing data that you have, that's, you can take businesses to the next level. So I think it's in all three areas. It's satisfying the regulations, regulatory demands, and bringing efficiency into the company, and then taking your business to the next level using data-driven digital transformation and all the analytics that it unleashes to be able to get into the new markets, to bring in new customers, innovate on the new products.
Okay, thank you. Don, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say, data interoperability, maximizing, what you get out of your data spend, reduce the time to value when onboarding new data sets, data consistency, data lineage. These are all the things that I think, people are aspiring to really do when they're making this transition to a modern infrastructure.
Okay, let's see what our audience says. We won't comment on this one. It's just interesting to see. There you go. Excellent. Mm-hmm. So many of the things that, under that operational benefits umbrella, many of the things that you said. Thank you for that. Thank you for voting, everybody. And coming to my final question today, I'd like to ask all our speakers to offer some advice for buy-side practitioners working to modernize data management. Sylvan, perhaps you could start here.
Well, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I would say tie everything you're doing to a business outcome. Mark my words, stressing how you enable business development is far stronger than showing how good your data quality is. I can tell you from experience.
Okay.
So that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is technology is not the answer. It's actually supportive, helpful in many ways. But if you don't understand why you're modernizing your data management, technology won't save you. And the last one is, while you're doing all these innovations and data science stuff and analytics and blah, 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 never forget your foundation. You won't be credible if you have too many quality issues.
Okay, Julia, a few words from you, please.
Those are really good. So I'll start with data literacy and business-driven data literacy. That's number one. Second one is business-driven data strategy, not technology-driven data strategy. I think that's one of the Sylvan's points as well. And the third one is if you don't have a chief data officer or you don't have a data-focused team, bring them in, because that's a skill set. Data management is a discipline. It's an area of study, and you need people who've done it many, many times. Because while I have said that from both business and technology perspective, there are a lot of how-tos, still experience is incredibly important. And so create a team that's focused on data capabilities. But don't forget that it's business-driven value.
Okay. And some final words from you, Don.
Yeah, so I would say, to build on top of what everyone else kind of contributed would be, stay focused on your target operating model, but think about getting there in stages. Think about the ways in which you want to get there, and also understand that, 80-20 is a really great place to start, especially if you can accelerate that first piece. And I think if you're going to use any technology vendor, make sure you interrogate what is actually real and can be done today versus, some of the things that are in their business plan. I think everyone is trying to catch up to the needs of of the industry. So interrogate the vendors that you do want to work with or may work with, and make sure what they have is real, and that they could do it today, and also can help you with that kind of delivering things in pieces.
Excellent. Thank you, Don, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing your expertise and experience today. And thank you to Bloomberg for sponsoring today's webinar. Just before we close, a few A-Team Group items that may be of interest. You can sign up for our next Data Management Summit London, which is shaping up to be a great event, and we'll be hosting it on the 30th of March. You can download our very popular but not very readable Regulatory Data Handbook, which is now in its 10th edition. And you can find out more about A-Team Connect, a powerful platform that we use and you can also use to deliver highly effective webinars and other types of events. So that's it for today. So thank you again to Julia, Sylvain, and Don, and thank you to all of you for joining us. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.